So excited to welcome you here to today's Bridges event. I know many of you who join us come to these every time we have them, but some of you, this might be your first time. So welcome, we're so thrilled to have you here. My name is Cody, I'm the Director of Community at Paragon One, and really excited to share with you that for the last 5 years, Paragon One has been really focused on helping students land their dream careers. And in fact, 1 in 2 extern alumni have landed jobs and internships at Fortune 1000 companies within 6 months of completing their program with us. And that's something we're really thrilled about. And we're equally excited to be sharing this space and this topic with you today. So as many of you are still coming in from the waiting room and landing into our session today, remember to get yourself situated somewhere with good lighting and little to no noise. Turn on your camera and get ready to take notes. We want to hear from you, so get ready to ask questions. There's going to be space later for the student Q&A. But let's go ahead and get started. I am really excited to introduce our moderator for today's session, Siobhan Gordon. Siobhan joined Morgan Stanley in June of 2022 as the Global Head of Diversity, Company, and Infrastructure after spending 21 years at Capital One. She spent much of her time at Capital One in the technology department before joining HR in 2014 to follow her passion for recruiting and supporting diverse talent. As Head of Diversity Talent Acquisition at Capital One, she had a tremendous impact across the company through her focus on attracting and developing leaders and mentoring associates. In particular, lending her counsel and insights to advance the growth and development of Black associates. In her new role at Morgan Stanley, she is continuing the diversity work that is both her passion and her purpose. In 2019, Siobhan was recognized as one of Savoy's most influential women in corporate America. That's amazing. Congratulations, Siobhan. She's also the president and CEO of the Caliber Global Leadership Network, and in 2020 was appointed by Virginia Governor Ralph Northam to the Board of Visitors for Virginia State University, a 138-year-old HBCU in Ettrick, Virginia. She has her Bachelor of Science in Systems Engineering from the University of Virginia and resides in Virginia with her daughters, Kennedy, who is 18, and Simone, who is 13. Whew, I am out of breath. Siobhan, that's impressive.
It's busy, Cody. It's busy.
Thank you for being here.
And thank you for that warm intro. It's always weird to hear somebody read your bio, but you did it great justice, Cody. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to be here. So it's nice to see the squares popping up and folks joining. We're so excited to have you here. It's also great to see your faces. And so if you are okay with turning your camera on, we don't care if you got on your sweatpants or your sweatshirts and your hair in a ponytail, we would love to see you. And then just a little bit of a warning, I actually am in Virginia. And what I was sharing with the panelists is we're having some interesting weather here, remnants of the hurricane. And so if for some reason you see me duck under my desk, it's just okay, it's tornado warning. Cody's gonna pick up and keep things going, and I'll give you guys a thumbs up to make sure you know that I'm okay. So again, excited to be here. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited about our panelists today. They have some really great stories and experiences to share. It'll be hard for me to focus because I was excited as I read their bios. And so I can't wait to jump right in. So why don't I go ahead and introduce our esteemed panelists. I'm actually going to start with Zach. So Zach Buchwald is head of BlackRock's institutional business for the US and Canada. Hey, Zach.
Hi, Sean.
Good to see you. It doesn't look like your settings are as ominous as mine, so that's good. Zach is leading one of the firm's largest client businesses, and he is responsible for the strategy and management of delivering BlackRock's investment capabilities to pension, foundations, endowments, healthcare, and family office clients. He previously led BlackRock's Financial Institutions Group in the Americas, and earlier he helped establish the firm's Retirement Solutions Group and Financial Markets Advisory platforms. Zach serves on several of BlackRock's executive committees, including the Global Operating Committee and the US-Canada Executive Committee. Zach is also the sponsor of BlackRock's LGBTQ or LGBT, sorry, I'm adding the Q and the plus, Zach, employee network. Before joining BlackRock, Zach was actually a manager director here at Morgan Stanley, where I work, where he led the firm's CLO business. Zach is a trustee of the Public Theater, producer of Hamilton, Fun Home and Girl from the North Country, and serves on the board of directors of the Jericho Project, which is a nonprofit homeless service organization. He is a frequent contributor to LinkedIn News, and his work has appeared in Newsweek and Fortune magazine. So welcome, Zach.
Siobhan, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Glad to be here. We look forward to hearing more from you later. Next, I would love to introduce Sheena Ghosh. Sheena initially joined Deutsche Bank Hong Kong in 2013, and since has worked across their London and New York-based offices covering alternatives in various capacities across fixed income-oriented hedge funds through to opportunistic hybrid solutions across public and private markets. Prior to Deutsche Bank, Sheena worked for Credit Suisse in London and Hong Kong, and Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong within Prime Services. It's a Morgan Stanley alumni group that we have here. Primarily focused on macro and systematic macro hedge fund strategies. Sheena holds a BSc in economics from the London School of Economics and Political Sciences. And Sheena, I'd also like to point out, is an SG, which we figured out in the green room. We've got 2 SGs on the call. So welcome, Sheena.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to speaking with you all.
Great to have you here. And really, we do have like a Morgan Stanley alumni group, so we'll have to catch up afterwards. Our next panelist is Thomas McKean. Hey, Tom.
Hey, happy Friday. Happy Veterans Day.
Happy Friday. And yes, happy Veterans Day to any folks who've joined us who are veterans. So Tom works in product management and capital markets at Bond Blocks Investment Management Company. Tom's career has been focused on innovation and fixed income. His proudest accomplishment is building and launching the Axe Match tool during his time at Barclays. The tool connects research trade ideas with live trader access. Prior to Bond Blocks, Tom held a variety of roles at Barclays Investment Bank, first within the credit research franchise, writing the Global Portfolio Managers Digest, and then helping launch a new team focused on product management and internal strategy for the FICC research franchise. Before Barclays, Tom worked at Bloomberg LP as a fixed income product specialist. Tom holds a bachelor's degree in behavioral neuroscience. I'm so excited and intrigued about that, Tom. And economics from the University of Kansas, and a master's degree in finance from Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Tom holds his Series 7 and Series 6.3 licenses. In his free time, Tom is actively involved in helping early stage health and fintech companies as an angel investor and advisor. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. So, as I shared, these are some really amazing bios. I think there's going to be a lot of great stuff that we're going to learn from talking to our panelists today. And so I can't wait for each of you to hear about their careers and the advice that they have for you. So let's get started, because I want to make sure that we allow enough time for you as panelists to get a chance to ask questions of our panelists. So my first question is actually for Zach. So Zach, you have an impressive background with experience leading lots of different businesses between BlackRock and Morgan Stanley. So I would be curious to hear how you broke into the industry and what's your experience been like leading these teams.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here, and I love that I can see a bunch of you on the screen. Thanks for joining us. Well, I lead the institutional business at BlackRock, so we manage about $2 trillion of assets on behalf of institutional clients in the United States and Canada. It's an incredible privilege because when I think about the folks that we're actually serving, it's mostly retirement dollars. If these are folks that spent their whole careers to earn a pension or putting money into a 401k, and we get to help them ideally experience more and more financial well-being. And it's I try to keep my eye on the people that we're ultimately serving, even as we're kind of making day-to-day investment decisions and thinking about portfolio construction. We're actually serving human beings who want to have secure retirements at the end of the day. I did not imagine that this is what I'd be doing 25 years ago when I entered the industry. I was an English major in college. I hire folks, a lot of people, and there's no need to, I can tell you all this, there's no need to be a finance or an economics major to have a career in finance today. My background is in English. I guess what I'd say to y'all is you should study what's interesting to you and do, be committed and do well in it. But there's no need to have a mathematics or finance degree. It's good to have an interest in the field and be able to demonstrate that interest, but there's lots of ways to do that without spending your whole career to do it. I applied to law school, Siobhan, and I thought that it would be fun to have a little break and move to New York and get a real job, and I did that. And I discovered that I worked at Lehman Brothers for a couple of years before I went to Morgan Stanley, and I discovered that I really enjoyed it. I found it compelling and challenging. And when I think now about the folks that work on my team, like the number one thing that gets them excited about coming to BlackRock and working every day is, are they challenged in their jobs? It's literally more important than like visibility and pay and collegial environment. Those are all really important too. But if you're challenged in your job, people tend to really want to come to work and get a lot out of it. So those are the kinds of things that I'd encourage everybody to think about. Study what you love, and then if you want to have a career in finance or asset management, learn a little bit about it and see if it's the kind of thing that you can imagine waking up in the morning and getting excited about, like I do.
Yeah, Zach, that's great. And so many things resonated with what you said. First of all, you're serving human beings. I think sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing that we forget that there's a person on the other side of whatever it is what we were doing. And then the thing that made me chuckle is your part about, like, I was an English major and I had no idea I was going to do this, because similar boat, like I have an engineering background, I work in HR, and people scratch their head on that all the time. And I was talking to exactly, like I was talking to a group of students last week, and I was like, there's a pretty good chance that whatever you think you're going to do now as an adult, you're not going to do as an adult. And so I think that's sound advice. What's important, right, is the experience in college, and getting and learning how to learn, to your point, and finding yourself in a role where you're challenged in your learning. So I love that. Great advice for our folks who are listening in.
Thanks, Siobhan. I'm going to fanboy for just 1 second and say, if you can have an engineering degree and then have the EQ to do the job that you're doing, then you must really have it all. Because most of us get specialized because we do one thing well or another thing well, but you've got the full kahuna.
Thanks, Zach. I was always the person that got chosen to stand up and talk about our projects in engineering. Like folks were like, Siobhan, you can present because you're good at talking to people. So I guess that still holds true. So Sheena, I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking to you and just explore your bio, because there's so much more, I think, to unpack in your bio. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your story. We heard about Zach, English major in law school, right? Which I think nobody would have guessed that from his bio. So I would love to hear more about your background and your story.
Sure. So I'm going to be completely honest. I fell into finance. I'm British, but I was born to an Indian family, and I don't know how many of you have Indian backgrounds, but there's really two acceptable career paths: medicine or engineering. And I don't like blood. So all I knew at the age of 17 was that I didn't like blood, didn't want to be a doctor, but I was doing economics. And I was actually lucky enough to be part of a female outreach program at Credit Suisse when I was 17. Knew nothing about banking, had never heard of an investment bank, but I spent 2 weeks on a trading floor and I fell in love with the energy. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a salesperson. Went back and I did an economics degree. So I literally picked my path. And my parents, bless them, they still think I help people over the counter. They have no idea what I do, even 16 years on. Every time I've been promoted, they're like, can you help my friends now? And I said, it's not that kind of bank. But I guess the reason I'm telling you that is because I meet so many people that have no idea about what they want to do. And that doesn't change. It's not like people in this industry have this whole path carved out. And for me, it was an escape from medicine, and I'm still here 16 years later. And I actually think what I enjoy doing now is having conversations with people as they're navigating their careers, because I'm still here and I still love what I do, but you do have points of inflection, particularly when you're not from a background that's natural to where you end up. And if you're still in it, you choose to be because you're intrigued, because of the opportunities, because of the people you meet. And I do think it's an iterative process. So I remember when I was sitting in that seat that what you guys are, and all I knew was, what's an investment bank? What's this? I just want an out. And it seemed overwhelming because you're like, which desk do I choose? And it becomes a sort of over complex decision. And the reality is, the first 4 years of your career, it really doesn't matter what job you do. What matters is the people you're around, the team ethic that you learn, the discipline you bring in from anything outside of your working career. Because guess what? You do not know that much when you start, whether you're a finance specialist or not. There's nothing like live experience. And I think if you come with a certain attitude, people want to teach you, and they take you under their wing. And that really makes a difference if you staying, particularly if you're not naturally drawn to finance.
I love that. And I think a big part of what I love about this event that we're all speaking at is this is your opportunity to learn about what it's like to do certain jobs and people's path to get there, because oftentimes you don't know that, right? Like for some of you on this call, you're probably first generation college student, and so your parents probably don't really know how to help you navigate this, either if you're in college or if you have a specialty, right, that your parents aren't sure of. Or in Sheena's point, she knew she didn't like blood. So it's like, all right, I guess I'm going to be an engineer, right? Whatever path you take to figure it out, what's important is you get to a space where you're doing a job that you love, right? It's either your purpose or your passion. It's challenging and you're learning and growing, which I think is really important, versus trying to put yourself in a box and saying, I need to go do this thing because I have this degree, or to Sheena's point, because people expect me to do it. Giving yourself the opportunity to learn and explore. Sheena, thank you for sharing that. And I love that. I didn't like blood, so let me try engineering. My youngest daughter was like, I want to be a doctor, Mom. I'm like, yeah, but you pass out at the sight of your own blood. I don't know that that's going to work. So I can relate. Last but certainly not least, Tom, I'm so excited to hear from you because you've actually recently made a career change yourself. And your background is different than the other two. So I'm curious to hear about, Tom, your career change, and then also the story of your career and how you've evolved and gotten to where you are.
Yeah, no, totally. Thanks for having me again. And no, I like the others, I really had no intention of entering finance. I didn't really even know anyone working in finance. I'm from the Midwest, and in Kansas City, most of the successful people I looked up to were doctors or lawyers. And I thought that was really the only option I had. And so I got really lucky, got an internship where I was working at MasterCard actually. So kind of tangentially related to finance. And there I met folks that had worked at investment banks or companies related to the markets. And that was my junior year summer. And that's when I really kind of entered the field and really kind of decided that's what I wanted to do. So it took some time, and kind of similarly, I thought about medicine. I thought about, getting a PhD, doing some other sort of more scientific work, and just finance and the markets really became interesting to me. So that's what kind of drew the initial interest. And the career transition, yeah, I spent the first part of my career at two really large companies, and now I'm one of the first hires at a startup that is a very different experience than what I'm used to. And it's been really exciting, and yeah, I'm super passionate about what we're doing here in the team. So it's been great so far.
Tom, that's awesome. And I know going from a large company to a startup is a huge change, right? Because you're going from, I guess, infrastructure and a lot of times a lot of people to an organization with few people, where I'm sure you probably have to wear multiple hats, which can be exciting.
Yeah, no, it's both good and bad. You want to push a project forward. No one's going to really stop you, but you're kind of doing it by yourself. You're not going to have a team of people to help you along the way as much, because everyone's stretched so thin. So yeah, it's been great, and I'd say net positive for me. And I guess kind of at my stage in my career, I feel really outshined by both Zach and Sheena. Like, I'm much earlier in my career, but I'm kind of working with people that I wouldn't get a chance to work with if I was at a larger institution that are really experienced. And so it's kind of, I think it's really going to accelerate my career growth being at Bond Blocks and kind of being at the early innings of this firm.
That's awesome. And I think it just goes to show too, like, different paths for different people. Some people may enjoy working with large companies that have lots of people, stable infrastructure, where others, they like the excitement, Tom, of working for a smaller firm where you actually do, if you want to do something, you can just go do it and not have to really ask a bunch of people and socialize it. But then the beauty of that too is you actually have to do the project. So I love that. All right, so it's been awesome to hear about everybody's background and kind of how they ended up where they are. I would love to hear about if there are some experiences, maybe 1 to 2 experiences, and they don't necessarily have to be work experiences, they could be personal experiences, but they were really defining for you in your career. So maybe force you to really rethink your career, try a different career, try a different location. And so I'd love to hear that from any of the panelists. Zach, is that maybe one that you want to tackle first? Or are you processing? Did I get you too soon?
No, that's good. I'm going to give you 2 really quick anecdotes. The first one is I'll tell you, when I started at Morgan Stanley, I struggled a little bit. The first couple of months, I remember trying to find my footing and figure out how to get my performance in gear and how to really connect with people. And then there was a moment I was working on a project where I sort of suddenly started to understand how to build the model, how to get the results. And a client that I was working with said on a big call, thanks, Zach, you really sort of connected the dots for us on this one. And I remember sort of feeling validated in that moment and having the people around me sort of nodding their heads. And it was a learning for me, not only because I felt like I was getting there in the job, but also because getting that feedback, having the visibility, having the validation was so important to me. And it was a learning that I kept with me as I became a manager and started helping to shepherd other people's careers. It's okay to have like challenges and struggles, especially at the beginning when you're starting off in a new job. And I did too. I've done really well in my career, but it wasn't always easy. And the other thing I want to mention, Siobhan, is, when I started I'm an out LGBT person. And when I started in the industry, I guess how I'll put it now is we weren't particularly welcome. I didn't feel particularly welcomed. We're still sort of an underrepresented population, but then, it took me a long time to sort of come out and be myself and be authentically myself. And so I've had my own journey. And now when people ask me about starting new jobs and do I have any advice, my number one thing that I always say to them is be authentically yourself, and it will help you in your career to not have to think about being the person that you want to be or you think that they want you to be. You get hired because they want you, and often because you bring something different than what's there already. And we're in just a different and much better place now in this industry than we once were. So being authentically you, I had all the struggles and tortures that you can imagine to get there. And that's the easiest way to give the advice is you get hired for you and you should be you.
Zach, I love that. There's so much goodness in that, right? And obviously, D&I professional, music to my ears to hear you talk about that. If you have to put so much energy into masking who you are as a person, that's so much more that you cannot put towards your job, right? And so knowing that you can come in and truly embrace who you are, I never say bring your whole self to work, but be able to bring as much of yourself as you want to work. That becomes so important. And I also love the nugget too around like knowing that you got to learn, right? Like you're going to make mistakes, you're going to stumble. Some of our best learnings are from our failures, right? Our missteps, and knowing that makes you human, and that's okay. Those are all great. Sheena, what about you?
There's 2 distinct things that really stand out for me. So one is I took it for granted at the time because when you have it, you don't know that it's the anomaly. And my first boss was really like a second father to me, which was annoying at the time. Obviously, one dad's enough. But as a woman in finance, it really shaped the first 4 years of my career. Like I had an MD's time in every meeting. He sat me down, he gave me feedback. I remember I had an awkward situation very early on where I had a PM ask me out and I felt really uncomfortable and he just changed coverage for me. And it, little things like that, but I took it for granted. And it's having a manager that puts your growth first, because, I'll be honest, when I came into finance, I thought, oh, let me do this for 3 years and I'll go and work for the UN and change the world, like most millennials. And it slips into the second thing. So the first thing is I had that authentic supporter that put me and my career first. And when I graduated in 05, so the financial crisis happened very quickly. And obviously 2008 happens and you think, oh gosh, I picked a terrible industry. My career's over, my parents were right, what do I do? And I tried to quit. I actually tried to resign at that point. And my boss said, don't quit, go to Hong Kong. I need someone to bridge the gap between Europe and Asia. I'd never been to Hong Kong at that point, but all I knew was in my personal life, I wanted to live around the world. So I guess that ties to what both of you said about authenticity. And I think people ask me all the time, how do you retain talent? I think both Zach and Siobhan have said it in two ways. You can't fake who you are for 20 years. You just can't. What drives you as a person personally is very much probably likely going to be the same types of triggers that are going to drive you professionally. So you really do have to align and be honest. And that doesn't mean not doing the work. I mean, you have to work hard, but in terms of being inspired, you will bring the best version of yourself, the most productive version of yourself in anything you do, and that will be picked up by your colleagues, your clients, if you're in a client-facing role. So that authenticity matters, and it's what keeps you sustainable and keeps you thriving. I mean, I've been in finance for 16 years, worked in 3 regions, 3 banks, and people have asked me, are you exhausted? And the opposite. I'm thriving and I love what I do because I've really picked every opportunity based on what felt right for me personally as well. So I couldn't, that's the number one piece of advice I would give anyone, whether you're at the beginning of your career, the middle of your career, or, well, yeah. Don't want to say end because that seems too far away from anyone on this call, but yeah.
Yeah, Sheena, such great advice. I love that. And I think the consistent theme, oh, by the way, the sun is now out in Virginia. So I don't know what's happening, but there's sunlight. I just love the theme around authenticity and just how that's resonating, because I think it's so important that whatever role that you decide to do, whether it's finance or whatever, that you feel like you can truly be who you are. So I love that.
Hey, Siobhan, what about that hidden piece of advice, which is that you do not need to date people at work that ask you out?
When you said that, Sheena, I don't know if you saw me cringe, but I was kind of
I think it's more like the speak up culture, I think is the more appropriate term. And that wasn't really a defined theme then. I just was lucky enough to have a manager that I felt comfortable in. Now you will see in most of these organizations, there's lots of training and focus around it. So Wolf of Wall Street is an anomaly.
Sheena, I was about to say that is the reason why most of us now take, and I'm glad we do, but it's like a 45-minute to an hour training around harassment at work, right? And what not to do. And that's so important. And the other nugget, Zach, that's kind of nestled in Sheena's story too, is the significance and importance of a strong manager and leader, right? Because it's, unfortunately, most of us probably have experience with a not so good manager or leader. And so, Sheena, what I loved is that you were exposed to a great leader so early on in your career, who actually helped guide you and kept you from making what could have been a career limiting mistake when you were kind of ready to quit. So I love that piece too. Just lots of great nuggets in there. So Tom, I actually have a question for you. Also, given you just switched careers, I'm curious your perspective on whether or not getting into a career in finance is different now than when you first started your career, or if you feel like it's about the same.
Yeah, so I mean, I started about 7 years ago, so I think there's definitely been trends towards the positive, and I think that over the last 7 years, I mean, when I was looking to enter, kind of coming from a non-target school, non-traditional background, and like no real connection to any of the major financial hubs, I would get asked questions like, do you even want to live in New York? Like, do you have family here? And questions that like you might not even be able to ask anymore, quite frankly, I think. And I think that now, especially with, post-pandemic, it's become just a more open world and people are more accepting. And I think that trend is something I've seen.
Yeah, I would agree. Interesting too. I'm curious if maybe Zach, you have any comment on this, and Tom as well. Um, whether or not folks are starting to embrace more of hybrid and remote in the finance space. Because Tom, you mentioned the pandemic. Like, curious if that starts to factors in as well. Zach, I don't know if you have any feedback on that either.
Yeah, I do. I mean, so at BlackRock, we're officially we're in a hybrid culture. We're in the office 3 days a week, and that is compulsory. And then the flexibility to be at home 2 days a week. You might hear some babies screaming in the background. We've got we have two 7-month-olds in the house, and their nap time's ending. It seems like it's ending early today.
Zach, it's okay if they have to happen to do a cameo in the background. I'm just saying.
I know. Well, it's funny because you're asking about like hybrid work environments, and it's totally changed the culture, because now, you know, you can see where we live, you can see sometimes our partners and our spouses, and you can hear the children and the dogs and all that. And, you know, it means that we've had more of our personal lives that have just sort of necessarily become exposed and part of our professional life. And I think it's mostly good and a little not so good. You know, it's great in that we're getting to know each other as human beings, and it brings us closer to one another, and we understand where we're coming from. And we also understand, by the way, when someone might be going through something tricky, or you have other things going on in your life besides work. And then sometimes it's a little awkward too. Like, you know, like you said before, you don't always necessarily want to bring your entire self to work. You just want to bring some of it or most of it, what you're comfortable with. So we're all still kind of figuring that out, I think, in our professional careers, myself included. At BlackRock, we're 3 days a week in the office and 2 days a week at home. And the generation that I'd say that struggles the most with the 3 days in the office is the generation of people that are on this call right now. I find that most of the new team members are quite comfortable working at home, and they like that flexibility. And I like having the hybrid work environment, but I'll tell you, as somebody who's been in the business a long time, I think being in the office with your colleagues is also really important. I think you'll learn a lot of things. There they are. You can hear them now. Yeah, you learn a lot of things that you just can't get on like Zoom appointment calls every 30 minutes. You just pick them up, and you have people sitting right next to you. You can ask questions in different ways. You develop more casual relationships with people that you're sitting with 8 or however many hours a day. So, I guess I encourage everybody to sort of be open-minded about an office culture, as well as a work from home and a more convenient culture, because it will really help. My view is it'll really help you in your career when you get to know people. And it also helps like develop mentorships, people that are going to think about you and your professional career, that you might struggle to develop those relationships if you're just doing it from home.
Completely agree. And I'd just like to add the bank perspective, and also to tie back to the comment the question you had earlier in terms of what's different between, I guess, our generation when we were graduating and the current generation. So my generation, when we were at university, like literally all the adverts were investment banks. So there wasn't really, that was the industry that was sucking away from medicine or science or NASA, etc. Now you've got tech, you've got private equity, you've got, take your pick. I mean, I feel bad for this generation because they're so overwhelmed by the choice that they have. And really, I think if you're not sure, having a broad perspective, and I think Tom is probably the best representative of, sometimes if you're not sure, it's great to go join a firm that gives you multiple options to learn from, and then you sort of home into something that you really like. Because I think if you're not sure what you want, and then you join a micro sort of specialist field, like whether it's crypto or whatever it is, then you're capping yourself very early on in your career before you even really know what you want. So that's one point. And the second point to the hybrid, just to back up what Zach actually said. So through the pandemic, I actually moved to California for a year because New York wasn't the most pleasant, and I'm a visa holder, so I couldn't go home. So my work actually let me go to California. So it didn't impact me because I was 15 years into my career at that point. But I've just moved back to New York, and in the past month, I'm almost getting overwhelmed because every grad wants to have a coffee and sit down and tell you their story. And you can see that they're craving the energy. And I'm on that trading floor, and I am just as excited as I was when I was a 17-year-old walking out to that floor. So you can't beat that sort of energy of being in an environment in a world like finance, because honestly, that's 50% of the draw of the finance is the innovation, it's the creativity, it's being around the smart minds and having those discussions. And you can replicate some of it virtually, but very early on in your career, when you don't already have those established connections, those concrete perspectives, it's very hard to create from the beginning.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And actually, I moved out to California during the pandemic as well from New York. And so I also just was in New York a few weeks ago and was on a trading floor at a large bank. And just that energy is something that I've missed out here in California the last couple of years. And I do think that there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And I think it's important to understand them. You know, I mean, this call is not something that I would have been able to join 7 years ago. And so it's connecting everyone together, but being in an office connects you as well. And so I think just trying to think about the pros and cons of both, and trying to take advantage of both of them.
I agree. And I think you all hit on some really important pieces that I want to highlight. One is culture, right? And what typically attracts us to a company and keeps us there, right, is the company's culture. And it's really hard to truly experience that if you've never actually been into the space where people are to kind of feel what that culture is like. And so one of the things that I love about a hybrid environment is it does give you that opportunity to feel the culture and experience the culture. It's ironic, at Morgan Stanley, about 70% of our staff in our India location was hired during the pandemic. And so they haven't really had a chance to experience the culture. So they're like, hey, I know we have this awesome culture, but I don't necessarily know what it is. And so it's really finding opportunities for connection, for that, you know, in-office conversation, the coffee chats, the team meetings where you actually are physically in a room, are some of the things that define the culture. And culture is just as important, if not more important, than all of the things that you're going to learn at the firm in your job. I mean, it's what creates the experience that brings us all back. Hey, look, the time has gone really fast, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to get to questions, but I'll ask this group one last question. We'll call it a bit of a lightning round. And it is, what is the number one resource that you'd recommend for folks who are listening on the call today, who want to get more experience about your function, your sector, what you do at your company, or just working in finance or with financial institutions? Zach, do you want to go first?
Super easy. LinkedIn. I post lots of stuff that I think is, I think of my audience as folks that are just sort of joining the industry or interested in the industry. I post lots of stuff from investors that I think are interesting, help people get smart on the markets, help people think about their jobs and their careers. That's a great way to get smart.
Agree. And also a great way to network, Zach. So building.
Hurricane's coming.
Sounds like an alert. Yeah.
Tina, why don't you go next? I couldn't figure out how to turn it off, but yes, I just got an emergency alert on my phone. So apologies. If anybody was dozing, you should be wide awake now.
My recommendation would be The Economist. I mean, I'm biased, but I've been reading it for 20 years. I just think it's a phenomenal snapshot of any area that you want to read on, whether it's politics or business or tech. Like, there's certain sections and it's not overwhelming. And it's a great way to sort of follow key themes, whether it's people talking about Elon Musk or Ukraine, Russia, just, high level key themes, because all of those topics eventually drive finance in some way, shape or form, regardless of where you end up.
That's great, Sheena. I love that. And I agree, like all of those topics are relevant. It's a great way to stay up to date. And then Tom, what about you?
Yeah, I guess I'm a little biased as a Bloomberg alum. I love to read Bloomberg News and everything Bloomberg, but also Fedify, if you're interested in ETFs, is a great resource as well, to learn about those markets.
Awesome. Love that too. All right. So great tips from our panelists for each of you. If you're looking to learn more about how to get into the sector, maybe follow in their footsteps from a career perspective. So hopefully you had an opportunity to jot some notes down on that. All right, with that, so we're not done yet. First of all, thank you so much to our panelists. Tons of insights that I think this group can walk away with as they're figuring out their next steps in their career journeys and college journeys. So thank you for that. But we're not done yet. So we're actually going to now allow time for questions. And first of all, thanks to all of our participants. I see the chat has been busy. You've been introducing yourself, which is amazing. It's a great way to build your network. And hopefully you're snapping maybe pictures of the screen so that you can see some of those names that you want to connect with later. But I've seen a couple of questions come in as well. So now we're going to give our students an opportunity to ask their questions. And so I think, Cody, you're going to let me know who is up first.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Siobhan. Our first student is Ankita Aichara. Ankita, are you with us?
Yep. Ankita, are you there?
Okay, Ankita's mic is not working. That's okay. We'll come back to you. Siobhan, let's do this. Ankita, I'll ask your question for you because it's a great question.
Okay.
Ankita's question is about understanding culture through the recruitment process. So, Siobhan and panelists, how would you recommend students learn about work cultures of firms as they navigate recruiting processes?
Awesome. I can take that one, but I'm actually going to see if I saw Zach, you came off of mute. Do you want to go first?
I want to hear what Siobhan has to say for sure.
So you guys probably saw my bio. I spent a fair amount of time in recruiting and leading recruiting organizations. And I think the thing to keep in mind is interviews are not just the company's opportunity to interview you. It is your opportunity to interview the company. And so during the interview, this happens in every interview, they always say, do you have questions for me? And your answer should always be yes. And those questions should be, hey, how would you describe the culture at company that you're interviewing for? The other thing is it tends to come through in the interview. So you can determine if, folks are happy about the work that they're doing. If they speak highly about their organization and their leaders, that will come through in the interview. So be mindful of that. And then I would encourage you to ask non-standard questions like, hey, what can you tell me about your company's ERGs? Are you a member of an ERG? When you are at a company, for example, like Morgan Stanley, it's not uncommon to have somebody say, I've been here for 21 years. Ask why. Like, hey, wow, it's hard to imagine being with one company for 21 years. Can you tell me what's kept you there for so long? And that is typically where you start to hear their perspective on culture, is with questions like that. But the key thing is to remember that the interview is two-way. It is them interviewing you, but it's also your opportunity to interview them. Would anybody add anything to that? No? Okay. All right, we'll go to next question, Cody. Thank you for that question, Ankita.
Yes, excellent question, Ankita. Next up is Justin Chu with a question.
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin, and I'm a junior in NYU. I'm actually calling from the library right now, so I hope it's not too loud. But I have a question about ESG. So I know that ESG is becoming very mainstream nowadays. So I want to ask, especially with BlackRock, how have you seen ESG been integrating into the investment process to prevent greenwashing, and kind of what distincts BlackRock as a company from other asset management companies?
Zach, I'm
Sure.
pretty sure that one's for you.
Yeah, I don't think I can get around this. Well, Justin, that's a great question, and ESG has become such an important topic in the industry and in the world, because one of our governing principles of BlackRock, how we're supposed to do our jobs, is to think about creating a sustainable future, and ESG is at the center of that. I mean, ESG itself kind of has different components, and a lot of people use it as shorthand for climate, although it also is the social and the governance aspects of investing and all the the financial practices around that. But just to focus on climate, there's a lot of ways that people can invest their dollars in a way that helps to support a sustainable future, or at least have transparency around how their investments are impacting a sustainable future. And one of the things that BlackRock about being so big is that we offer a lot of choice. And what we find in the United States is that we have a lot of clients who want to invest through an ESG framework. And we've got also a bunch of clients that don't think about that as one of their priorities. And And our goal as an advisor is, I'll tell you, like when we build portfolios, we think about all the different risk parameters in the portfolio, and climate risk is something that's incorporated into all of our portfolios because we think about that as one of the important risk factors. Some of our clients, though, choose that they want to invest sort of ex ante, not necessarily thinking through an ESG lens, and they have that choice. Part of the idea of working at a big firm is that choice is at the center of it, and we want to serve clients in the ways that they want to be served. Now, having said that, ESG is an enormous part of what we do. Enormous. Like we have huge efforts dedicated to decarbonization strategies, dedicated to energy transition strategies. And those are growing like mad because most of our investment clients, they understand A, how important it is, and B, how there's a huge opportunity to generate a really big return there. I mean, I think about all the investment that needs to go into creating renewable energies, into recycling, battery storage, water desalination, like all these components that are important parts of the future. And it's a great place to actually invest capital. So I'm really passionate about it. But I have to temper it because I run a business that operates in 50 states. I have to temper it by saying like choice is at the center of what we do, and we want to invest portfolios based on how our clients have preferences and how they want us to invest it.
Do you mind if I just add a comment? Because I'm actually taking my CFA in ESG because I'm so inspired by it. And it's probably what's going to keep me in finance for the next 10 years as a result of it. So Justin, to your point and to Zach's point, Europe is probably about 15 years ahead of the Americas in terms of their focus on this space. And it's really not only climate focused, it's really sort of fed through to, if you think about things that do make sense, electronic cars, like you lead back to actual resources and what that means. So it's really tying all the way back to minerals and financing. And all of a sudden you've got this incredible way to bring in making a difference in the world, as well as, financing these opportunities to make a return for your clients. And it does vary to clients. So I guess to answer your question, if you are passionate about this, there are certain roles that you can join. So for example, I've just started working very closely with our head of ESG. She ran structuring from Bank of America and Deutsche Bank in US and Europe for 25 years before she came into this role. Now she's the head of ESG investing for fixed income and currencies, and I love working with her. So she's inspired me to get my CFA. So I guess my point is to tie to what Zach said is finance is shifting in a way that we're having to justify at governance level as organizations, or how we're using our balance sheet, how we are financing certain projects. So it all ties back, and it's only growing one way. I think it started very much in the equity, and now it's actually filtering through to the private space. So it's a really, really exciting place to be. And when you think about, I want to make a difference in the world, it's actually really satisfying to me to have spent all this time in finance and now actually feel like I'm making a difference in the world. So, the failed doctor sort of syndrome, like finally I do feel like it's come around. So if you want to be involved, you can, but if you're focused on products and markets where it's not yet a priority, that's also okay. But the point being is there's opportunities across all. So please don't think that finance isn't for me because I care about the environment, or I care about social projects, or I care about governance. You can get this through finance as well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Zach and Sheena.
Justin, thank you for the question. All right.
And our next question comes from Debbie, who's not able to speak, but I'll read her question.
Okay.
Debbie's question is, how do you know it's time to leave a job when you feel that maybe it's a toxic workspace? So different question for you all, curveball.
That's a great one. Tom, I think I saw you come off of mute first. Do you want to grab that one?
Yeah, sure. No, I think that there's a lot of factors that need to go into when it's time to make a career change. So it's not black or white. I mean, if you feel uncomfortable, I feel like you should always speak up. And, I think that organizations now have to really have policies in place to protect those that are, like you mentioned, like you cringed when you heard about, Sheena getting asked out. Like there's a lot of things like that have changed in the industry. So I think that it's always better to speak up and talk about issues. If you feel like you're in a toxic environment, I think you should always speak up.
Yeah. And I think the fact that you use the word toxic is telling, right? Like most of us wouldn't describe our culture or our environment as toxic. And so that says to me that you've already made a determination that a change is necessary. And so I think that's important as well. So Tina, I saw you.
Yeah, I think it's because I would say one of the changes I made in my career, I didn't think through, and I took a sort of irrational rather, just impatient jump. And you should never regret anything you do, because I actually ended up in the US, but it made me reflect on why it is. So when you say toxic, what is it that's toxic? Is it a particular individual? Is it an environment? So for example, the pandemic just happened. That's nothing to do with your company, that happened to the world. So making decisions on your professional that are really a reflection of something that may be going on in your personal sort of headspace, moving job is not going to solve for that. So really take the time to think about what it is that makes you feel like it's toxic. Because if it's an individual, that can be changed. If it's a role, you can move. I mean, I've worked in 3 regions, and specifically for Deutsche Bank in 3 regions. So, and when I first got to Deutsche Bank in 2017, I had taxi drivers feeling sorry for me because I worked for Deutsche Bank, because we went through, as a firm, a very tough time. That was nothing to do with my experience. That was everything to do what the company was going through. And I think that's where it's really takes some time to understand the source and understand, is it personal to you or is it really the firm? Because then you've got to make a choice. Like, am I going to be there for the firm and ride through a process that they're going through and trust that there'll be a better sort of outcome on the other side? And then you're part of the rebuild. It depends on your mindset.
I got something to say on this as well. So setting aside toxic, because like Siobhan said, if it's toxic and you're miserable, you'll know it. The more common situation is why should I stay at this job? And the reasons, rather than why should I leave, I'm going to reposition as why should I stay? Here's why you should stay at a job: because you're challenged, because you have a great relationship with your manager and you feel like they support you, because it's a collegial environment that you enjoy coming to and being in, because you have visibility, you feel like you're actually getting properly recognized for your work, because you think your pay and your promotion are fair, you feel good about that, and because you like the work. Those are all reasons that you should stay. And the company that you work for should be delivering these things to you. So it's not just you having to leave, make a decision or get these things. The company is supposed to be sort of re-underwriting why they hired you. They like having you there. They think you're great. They're supposed to be making sure that you stay challenged and give you stretch assignments when your job is a little, ho-hum. So if you're getting all those things, that's the reason why you should stay at the job. And if you're not getting all those things, that might be a reason to leave.
Yeah. Zach, I love advice that Minda Harts gave in her book, The Memo, which is you deserve a seat at every table, but not every table deserves you. And so just kind of keep that in mind. And that just resonates with me, right? Because it's everything that all of our panelists just said around making that decision around why should you stay, right? Do you stay at the company? So, Cody, maybe time for one more quick question.
There is time for one more. And we're having a lot of microphone issues today, but it's such a great question, especially to end on. Kang Tran has asked, what are some great resources you would recommend to get financial internships, especially for students not in finance or business related majors?
That is a great one. Tom,
Yeah.
it's like Jeopardy. I think Tom hit the button first.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've gotten most every job I've had since school through LinkedIn, in some way or another. And, it's just a great place to, one, find jobs, and two, meet people that you otherwise don't have in your general vicinity. And the MasterCard internship I mentioned that kind of spurred my entire career path in finance was just a random application on LinkedIn, and I got really lucky. I didn't know anyone there. It was really, I guess, just a good match, and they saw something in me. And I think you've got to put yourself out there, and if you do that, I've had a lot of just good luck in reaching out to people. And it was a way, like I remember at Kansas where I literally just put in like people from University of Kansas living in New York, and I would just reach out to them. And that's kind of like my first steps in getting into the industry, and it ended up working out. So I think that it's a great resource.
Awesome.
I'm just-
Zach.
I'm
Oh.
just
Yeah,
going
yeah.
to add
Just-
sorry,
no,
go on,
please.
Zach. Yeah.
No,
I was just going to add, oh, go on, is there
No,
any-
no, please, I insist. I insist.
Go ahead, Sheena.
Just,
Go ahead, go
just
ahead.
on the flip side, because being proactive is one thing, but also remember how many of those types of reach outs and outreach and emails that the people that you're reaching out to are getting. So it's very, very important to be personal. So I'll give you a classic example. The last time I did Paragon 1, by the way, Paragon 1 is a great resource. I had someone that reached out and sent me an email that said the subject of something I'd said, and it made me smile. So we actually ended up having a bit of a chat. So there was a personal element to that. It wasn't just, how can you help me? It was, you know, there was a connection. And internships give you a better chance, because if you think about from the company's perspective, if they're going for a graduate program, that's a guaranteed job, and that's a lot more that they have to scrutinize, whereas an internship is sort of a long interview, right? So it's the best of both worlds. So as long as you're articulate and you're passionate, they're more likely to give you the chance of an internship, and then that has a domino effect. If you do the internship and you impress people, you're more likely to be offered a role as a result of it, and it creates a chain. At least that's what happened in my case, and I see it with a lot of the grads coming through, that most of them have done an internship and were offered a role. And to the culture point comment, you start to feel part of a culture because they've been involved in every step of your journey.
Awesome. And then Zach.
Okay, so I'm glad Sheena came first, because I want to underline your point of the reach outs on LinkedIn. They have to be short and they have to be personalized. They have to demonstrate credibility and a real interest in the job. And like I actually I get tons of these outreaches, and there was one that was so good that I got a couple of months ago. I took it, and with her permission, I posted it on my LinkedIn as an example of the kind of outreach that actually gets through to me, someone like me. And here's why it worked. And after that, of course, I started getting all these outreaches that looked exactly like the one that I had posted. But I tell you that to say how important LinkedIn is, like the great equalizer. I mean, we're all just one square on LinkedIn. We're all equal, and you can reach out to anybody. And if you do it right, it can really make a difference. I'm gonna, in lightning speed, I'm gonna tell you two more things. Go to the BlackRock website and look for Find Your Future Forum, which is a program that we've developed. It's just like 1 or 2 days, and it's intended for folks that come from populations that might not otherwise have access. And what we do in a day or two is we try to teach you like a lot of the things that that might help you decide if you're interested or not interested in asset management, and to prepare you for interviewing for an internship. And it also gives you a foot in the door at BlackRock, but it also helps you prepare for other parts of the industry. And then the second thing I want to tell you is we have an internship program at BlackRock called our BlackRock Founders Scholars, which is 100% designed for people from underrepresented populations that might not have felt like they had a home in the asset management industry. And there, it's not only getting the internship, it's also getting a really nice big stipend for your senior year of college. And that's called BlackRock Founder Scholars. Definitely encourage everybody to check that out because it's a great program.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice. And just know that there's tons of early career programs out there for freshmen, sophomore. So you don't have to be a junior or senior to participate. I think we have one at Morgan Stanley. It's called Early Insights, and it's just that. It's Early Insights to help you kind of figure out what you like to do. Also helps with resume writing and interview skills. So all of that stuff is really important. And then externships is also a great way, as Sheena mentioned, to kind of get a feel for what you do and you don't like. And then you could be a bit more targeted in internships. All right, 1 minute to spare. Thank you for the questions, by the way. Cody, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out. Thanks to our panelists as well. Really great answers to the questions.
Thank you. I can barely keep up with all of these really great resources in the chat. Before you close out, take a look at this chat and grab those links. Thank you so much, Zach, for being here. Incredible. Sheena, awesome insights. Tom, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And Siobhan, beautiful, beautiful moderation. Thank you all so much. And students, remember, as Sheena said, we're here for you at Paragon One. So if you're looking to take your next career step, or maybe just build your resume a little bit more, check out the chat for more information for programs like our program with PwC, or finance forward programs like our HP Tech Ventures program, or Energy Innovation Capital. We are so excited that you are here to join us. And remember that if you liked this, you might like some of our other Bridges events, which you can find on our Paragon One YouTube. So check that out. And we want to hear your feedback. So when you get the email from me later today, check it out. Lots of good resources, and let us know your feedback. So our Bridges events in 2023 will be exactly what you want and who you want to be seeing. Thank you, everyone, for an incredible event. I hope you have a really great Friday and have a great weekend. Be well.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye.